We just want to start off by bragging about the fact that we're about to read Greg Trimble completely sober.
We are raw dogging Greg Trimble.
Zelph.
On the shelf.
We are reading what looks like a horrifying read today by Greg Trimble, and the title is Take It Easy on President Nelson.
Aww.
He has it so hard.
The chief of a multi-billion-dollar company.
Oh God.
Is just where he can live out all his wildest religious fantasies.
I know.
And be a puppet master of the Utah State Legislature.
Kick his wife out of bed whenever he wants. He's having a revelation. I'm hung up on that. I really am.
That'd be like, hey, I need to tweet. Will you get up and...
Okay, do you remember how I don't know if you did, but I used to think that Greg Trimble was like kind of like a loving dad figure, and then we did the video where we responded to his video with 3 Mormons and realized that he's not at all. He's just super judgy.
I was never under the impression that Greg Trimble was a loving guy.
Is he a dad? He's a dad.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I always have too high expectations for dads, apparently.
A lot of people have asked us to do this. That's why we're doing it. We have heard your pleas. They have reached the ears of Zelph.
Cries in the night. And we are here to bring you the light of the morning.
Greg Trimble. I wish we should have some glitter that we throw once an episode. We have a moment, and you'll know when it is.
Greg Trimble thinks men shouldn't be too flamboyant on screen, but I disagree. Okay, you start. Oh God, I'm scared. Oh, we haven't looked at this at all, so.
I read the first line and I already want to face. I woke up to what I considered some good news from the church yesterday.
That's because whatever news the church gave, you would consider it good, Greg. You sound like you're like a horse giving birth or something.
That's truly what I am. I woke up to what I considered some good news from the church yesterday. But along with it, for some reason, came also a slew of negativity toward the prophet and apostle.
I bet if we went back and read his blog where he was like bitching about all the people complaining about that policy, that would be interesting. Someone would have talked about the policy to him a day before he got that news and said, I think it's bad. I don't think it's inspired.
Absolutely.
He would have shot them down.
Absolutely.
Can people not see, oh, we're going straight in, are we? Can people not see that President Nelson and the apostles are trying their hardest to do what's right? Okay. Can people not see that? Based on what? What inside information do you have? All you're going off of is that they tell you that, or you just believe that that's true. You have no evidence that they're trying that.
And have you ever met someone who's off of Twitter who has said like, I'm not doing my best?
Exactly.
I'm like, I'm kind of half-assing it. Like everyone, that's part of like your psychological makeup is to like justify your decisions to yourself so that you always think you're in the right.
Almost everyone is trying their hardest to do what's right all the time, whatever right looks like to them. And everyone has a completely different version of what right looks like because we're all conditioned differently and we all grow up with different batshit religious ideologies.
And you can't just give a religious leader a pass. It's like, I'm sure can't everyone see that L. Ron Hubbard was just,
Can't everyone see that Warren Jeffs is trying, guys?
He's doing his best.
And he's in prison and he's out there still just doing his best to lead these people.
Can you imagine the immense pressure they feel as they literally spend their lives trying to make the right decision for so many people, and knowing that no matter what they do, there is going to be a huge segment of people who are going to be hurt, offended, or angry about their decision? Yeah, no shit, Greg, because it is affecting all of our lives, not just the Mormons who live in this fantasy world.
Can you imagine the immense pressure they feel as self-proclaimed prophets and revelators with no prophetic, revelatory, or seership, what do you call that, powers? Also, can you imagine the immense pressure gay families were under because of this policy that you defended 3 years ago? I'm sure, I feel like we don't even need to look it up. I'm sure he has a post on his blog defending the policy.
We'll go back and look it up.
Yeah. He's just gone straight into this essay as well with like, do you think this is a compelling argument, Greg, to anyone who is not already firmly in your defend the prophet, whatever happens camp? Like, no one's convinced by, guys, they are trying.
It's so funny. I just got to a good place, did that video about Jesus, and then like right back I'm like, I just want to fight everybody.
These men are in their 70s, 80s and 90s. Oh, we're well aware. Most of them have been professionally successful enough to lay on a tropical beach or lounge in a Park City cabin or just spend as much time as they can with their grandkids.
Wow, you've defined privilege really well, Greg. Awesome.
But instead, they'll endure the stress of being revered by millions. They'll endure the stress of trying to make both God and everyone else happy until the day they die. I thought their whole thing was not to make people happy, but only to make God happy.
And they don't care about making God happy because they all have their second anointing. They're trying to make themselves happy, Greg.
Yeah, let's not forget, Greg, these men have had their second anointing, which, as I said in our last video, means that they believe no matter what they do in this life, they're going to the celestial kingdom, the highest tier, no matter what they do. If you don't believe us, listen to the episode of Mormon Stories with Tom Phillips, who received his second anointing.
Kick a widow down the stairs. You're still
in. Going. People are relentless on them. Everything they say and do is and will be scrutinized. They came together and walked back a policy that made a lot of members and the church really happy.
Wait.
Sorry, what?
Are they talking about the policy making people happy or the action of walking back on it? And well, he says, and yet still people are never satisfied. So I think he's talking about walking it back.
Okay. Well, as always, Greg needs to go to some kind of creative writing class. Just something.
We ought to scrutinize the hell out of anyone who has the pretension to speak in the name of God, because think of all the atrocities that have been done in the world in the name of God. People just close their eyes, bow their head, and say yes anytime a prophet or a guru or whoever claims to speak for God. So yes, they ought to be scrutinized, and yes,
more than anyone,
more than anybody else on earth.
Otherwise, you're in a cult.
Yes, Greg. I'm just gonna
Every
go.
video we ever do is just Greg. Also, if even one gay kid is killing themselves because of something that you did, then you deserve to be scrutinized to hell. Like, one gay kid isn't an acceptable amount of collateral damage.
For as much as they want to have this persecution complex, do you ever know anyone who's killed themselves because they were just so hurt by being Mormon?
Exactly.
It doesn't.
Well,
yeah,
but because they then realized it was all false and they were so traumatized from it. Yeah. And yet, still, people are never satisfied. He sounds like someone talking to his wife that's like, "You're never satisfied, woman." There's always something else to find fault with. There's always something else that they should have done differently or said differently. He's just completely sidestepping the whole, like, what about the fact that they said this was revelation and then 3 years later it's now apparently a different revelation, and you're acting as if they did this, like, for people to make people happy, but then you also say that everything they do is exclusively for God and what God wants. So I'm getting a lot of mixed messages here, Greg.
It really is so interesting to view the parallel. Like, someone commented on one of his videos, they said, you guys are always comparing the church to an abusive relationship, and it really is like that. And he's taking on, like, classic. Abusive verbiage. Which is like, why are you trying to scrutinize everything I'm doing? It's like, I'm holding you accountable for the things that you say and do. That's it. And in as much as you have messed up, I would like an actual heartfelt apology, rather than just being like, why are you always complaining? I'm not doing it anymore. And it's like, the fact that the first presidency and the apostles were willing to make the change so quickly on this policy shows to me a great deal of humility.
3.5 years isn't that quick. You could have done it within 1 week of releasing the harmful policy. As soon as you saw that calls to the suicide hotlines went up astronomically in the days after the policy change, you could have done it then, guys. This is like the amount of time they needed to conduct enough market research to convince them that this was something that was harming their bottom line, harming their baptism numbers, so they needed to reverse it. I mean, I guess Greg's taking the stance that the brethren made a mistake 3 years ago, but he would never say that. It's doublespeak.
Yeah, we haven't got it yet.
Because he's implying that, you know, the fact that they were willing to walk it back so quickly shows humility. So in that sentence is implying that they made a mistake. Guarantee he wouldn't actually admit that. Double think. That is the definition of double think.
Yes. Again, let's use just an abusive partner in this situation. It's like saying, oh, they realize after 3 years of being abusive, shows a great deal of humility without apologizing, acknowledging the damage that's been done.
It just shows how little he's actually able to empathize with the people that were affected by this policy change, because that is 3.5 years of people's lives, Greg.
Jesus was famous for reaching out to the people on the periphery, the people who were being hurt by institutions of power, and he never was like, we all need to give Caesar a little break. We need to give the Pharisees a little break. He was vicious on those people, Greg. You're defending the wrong people, the people who haven't been hurt at all, whose lives will go on in their beautiful you know, top of their...
And guess what, Greg? They're still going to cabins in Park City.
Yeah,
You're an idiot if you think they're not.
They have a private hunting reserve that they all get to go to. They all have vacation homes in Laguna
on God
Beach.
being into hunting. Also, like, it's just classic Greg to be defending the people in power, not the vulnerable, marginalized people who are hurt so deeply by this policy.
Exactly.
He's defending the man who sits in a plush red velvet chair and has millions of people post a picture of him on Instagram on his birthday and claim that he's, you know, he thinks he's the most important man in the world. He's the prophet of our planet. Like, the ego rush of that must be insane. And you can see that with Nelson especially, because he's, you know, he's all about, like, he's doing that, like, little, what did you call it, like a victory tour? You know, he's essentially going around doing rallies, defending the people in power, not Christ-like at all. After he said, shows to me a great deal of humility, he said, especially President Nelson. Why especially? He could have just left it alone a little longer and let the next president of the church handle it. How low is your bar? How low is your bar? Let's assume the best of these men and assume that they reversed this policy because not because it was hurting their bottom line, not because of baptism numbers, but because they realized it was harming innocent, vulnerable people. Why on earth would you even have the thought? Like, he could have just let the next president handle it. Like, he could have just been completely void of empathy. He could have just been a complete sociopath and left it for someone else. Like, you're just like backing up the narrative that these men like get a rise out of their power. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not what a prophet's supposed to do. He's not supposed to be protecting his reputation. He's supposed to be the mouthpiece of God on the earth today.
Yeah. I feel genuinely gobsmacked. Just like, almost, I feel like we need to name our channel like Dear Greg Trimble, where we just like teach you how to be an empathetic human, Greg. Because this is just like next
it
level.
Really is bad, isn't it? Like, I feel like I could write a better, I could write this article better than Greg. Like, I could put on my Mormon hat and do a better job justifying this policy reversal and creating empathy for the apostles than Greg has done. Like, he doesn't understand logic, like just basic reason. But he confronted the issue and is trying to make things right. So in that, again, you're implying that there was something wrong with the policy, that it was wrong to implement it, which means, Greg, that President Nelson, who said that this was revelation from God, was either lying or mistaken. Either way, it throws a spanner in the works with your whole follow the prophet no matter what ideology that you have.
Zero consistency. I wouldn't like any policy banning any children of any family dynamic from being baptized.
Is that what you said 3 years ago?
I think we should look it up before we make any assumptions.
Wait, but come on, when have you known Greg Trimble to ever say anything negative?
I mean, he's doing this. He's outdone him. He's out-Trimbled himself. Greg Trimble, I've said this on our last video, I think, with him, was one of the reasons why I found out the Book of Mormon wasn't true, because I read his list of reasons it was true, and I was like, this is really shoddy. And then I'm reading the comments, and someone had posted like a Mormon Think article before I even knew what that was, and went to it and was like spent all night reading, was just like, oh fuck. So thank you, Greg. You expedited my really long drawn out process.
Then he says, but I also know that there are lots of things that I don't know, and if I don't have all the facts, then how can I judge the decision as a folly of a man or a temporary policy from God? No question marks in that question. Okay, so he's saying, I wouldn't like any policy banning any children of any family dynamic from being baptized. So he's essentially saying that he didn't like the policy, but he fell in line because he's just a...
Who's to say if it's right or wrong? They're killing Jews. Who's to say what's right or wrong?
He's literally...
Have a little backbone, Greg.
He's outsourcing his like moral compass to these men just because they tell him to, just because they say the prophet's always right, follow the prophet. Like, he's not even allowing his own internal compass that told him that that was wrong to guide him. Literally what Jesus talked about.
This idea is really impressing upon me more and more, that like, because you know, as you leave the church, you kind of ask yourself like, who am I without everything that I've ever known? And what you realize is that like, what you thought was the church was who you already like genetically were reacting to certain parts of the church. So everyone has different principles and ideas and stories that resonate with who they just intrinsically are.
Yeah.
And some people, for them, is like the loving kindness, Jesus, and all that. And then for other people, who they are are like malicious, angry, judgmental people.
Or they really crave that authoritarian, like dictatorial. I use them.
Or they're hurt and they're putting that onto other people. But then there are parts of the gospel that that people can do this. And it's those like Captain Moroni, Danite. Look through our YouTube comments, you'll find them. And Greg is hitting like on all the stuff that like classic abusers and like cults. This is it. This is a perfect example.
I guarantee there are Mormons who could do a way better job than this of defending this policy. We don't know what is going on behind the scenes. So true. So then why are you letting these men control everything you think you can do?
We don't know what the wizard's doing behind that curtain, and frankly, I don't want to know.
We don't know what situations might have arisen that might have caused the policies of the past. We don't know what information they have when these decisions are being made. We don't know if it was a revelation regarding the policy or just an honest mistake.
He said it was a revelation! Down the memory hole that one goes already. God, your attention span is like a goldfish. And honestly, if someone believes in the God of the New Testament, then you don't have to look far to see the policy reversals that took place in a very short amount of time.
Oh yeah, Christ with all of his handbooks.
Christ himself changed the policy as to which people the gospel should be preached to within about a 2-year time span, and it confused the heck out of Peter, and I'm sure many others.
Okay, making a slight like demographic change in who you want to preach your message to is not the same as saying that you got a revelation that a super harmful policy should be implemented and then like going back on it 3 years later.
Well,
what the fuck?
Apples and razor blades.
Anyone who has been hurt by various church policies and has cried out for acceptance and understanding should offer the same acceptance and understanding towards the fallible volunteers who are trying their best to steer this massive ship we call the church. AKA, victims should show compassion to their abusers. That's what he's saying. The vulnerable, marginalized victims of the situation should have an equal amount of compassion for the men with tons of power in charge of it all, making these decisions from their ivory tower that affect all of these people who they will never meet or even try and understand.
They should offer the same level of acceptance and understanding. Here's the thing, the church hasn't offered any level of acceptance and understanding. We're like, coexist, whatever. But the fact is, the church refuses to understand or accept. I just listened to Nelson's talk. Pile of fear-mongering horseshit. I was like astounded at his like absolute inability to have even the most like slightly profound philosophical or theological thought. He doesn't have any depth to him whatsoever. He's like a child who's just like, oh, my club is my club, and if you don't sign up for my club soon, it's all gonna end. And it's like, if it's all ending soon and we're running out of time, how come you're refurbishing all those fucking temples, Nelson? He's like, over the next 10 years, we're gonna be, I'm sorry, that's a whole other video.
This is obscene.
No, this is truly obscene.
Then he says, assume that they're not egotistical monsters and that they are good people trying to find the correct path. Assume? What do you mean assume? By their fruits ye shall know him. Them. That's what your scriptures say. We're looking at their fruits. They are bullshit.
And I don't doubt that they're like nice old men.
Sure.
And is that what being a good person means?
They're like my granddad, who was like slightly racist, slightly homophobic, was technically a nice old man, but he's not fit to lead a bunch of people. He's certainly not fit to lead everyone in the world.
And what's your scale of like good person, bad person? It's like
the bar is
Saddam Hussein.
Low. The church was never perfect. It will never be perfect, ellipsis, until Christ comes and takes an earthly command. But even then, does anyone think that when Christ comes that he is going to make policies that everyone agrees with?
Okay, this is a classic Mormon flip-floppy thing. The whole like, church isn't perfect, or like the members aren't perfect, but the church is. The church isn't perfect, but the gospel is. The gospel isn't perfect, but God is. God isn't perfect, but the plan of God. It's always taking a step back and then they can circle around. It's total mental gymnastics.
And it's like an abuser being like, babe, listen, it's going to be so much better once I'm out of my stressful job. Like, then I'll be better. It's just like, anyone can say that. Like, where are the fruits, Greg?
It's like when people are like, oh, it doesn't make sense, but it'll make sense in the next life. It's like, that's just an admission
that it doesn't make sense.
That it does not make sense.
Anyone can say, yeah, we know this doesn't make sense. It will make sense in the next life. Any fucking crazy person can say that?
And so if you want to go on about how this is like the only true church and then say it's imperfect.
And then nothing makes sense.
Well, could you consider that there's churches then that might be even more perfect?
Yeah.
Or,
so it doesn't make sense. It's harming people. The people saying they're getting revelation are not. And by the way, this is not the first time that Mormon leaders have said that they got revelation or that something came from God when it was actually just a pile of like racist, homophobic garbage.
Yeah.
That's the entire church history.
The polygamy split, they don't talk about it much in church, like, and in school settings, but like, there was a huge shift because so many prophets had been like, I promise you that on this day, that if you ever see the church accepting monogamy, the great plan of Satan, that the priesthood will have been lost from the earth, and they'll no more have the keys and lose, and you know, and then so when the church was like, we're monogamous now, there was a bunch of people who were like, well, the prophets told us this day was coming, so bye.
I'd almost respect the church more if they kept the policy, because it's like, sure, like, don't you at least believe it was revelation? Like, how can you not stand by your own alleged revelations? Like, what the hell? The bottom line is, let's hear what the bottom line is according to Greg Trimble. The bottom line is that if there is a loving God, then there is no policy on this earth that is going to keep you out of the presence of God. And long as you are living your life as a good person, what makes you a good person? You feel that things are bad, and then you still are okay with them because like the person that is in power in your church says it's okay. Being
a good person, as we all learned from Harry Potter, it's a good person who can stand up to even their friends. And don't you think a better test of your goodness wouldn't be to stand up to the evil ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons, but to the very people who you've been conditioned to respect and trust the most?
When did Jesus ever advocate for just falling in line and like not questioning, and like they're hypocrites? Like, be good at your own stuff.
Obedience has never been the equivalent of morality.
Jesus
or a good indicator of morality. Never.
And that's classic cults, is is like equating obedience with morality. It's like,
or in their sense, from that I gathered from Nelson's talk, it's not even about pure obedience, it's just association. That if you're in the church, then you're gonna make it to heaven and be with your family, but if you're not associated with us, bye. How ethnocentric can you get?
I feel like I'm doing such a terrible job articulating in this video because I'm just shocked.
I've been like,
it's like so juvenile and absurd that I don't even I can't even my brain can't even like give it enough credibility to form a coherent response because it's so stupid.
It's like trying to remember how you thought as an 8-year-old or something.
It is.
Despite any personal shortcomings, which we all have, I think President Nelson is one of those good guys with a good heart.
So I don't care that he said it was revelation when it wasn't, or that families were hurt enormously for 3.5 years. Many of them hurt irreparably because like reversing a policy change doesn't undo all that damage and 3.5 years of trauma that is embedded in your psyche.
Good people apologize. Across the board. If you know someone who doesn't apologize,
said that.
They are not a good person. You can quote us on that.
Jesus. I don't think Greg's gonna like it when Jesus comes back. We're having wine with him.
I think he loves all the members of the church regardless of their positions on these various policies.
And yet, Greg has slammed people before for not aligning with the church on policies and acted as if they are like, you know, being disobedient to God. Oh, the double speak.
So take it easy on him during these confusing days we live in. They're not confusing for us. You guys are the confused ones because you're always getting mixed messages all the time.
And then he says, so take it easy on him during these confusing days we live in. I think better days are yet to come.
Like Nelson sitting there on Twitter going through all the subtweets about him.
Take it easy on him. He's having such a hard time. Like, what? How has he suffered at all in this?
Honestly.
How would he even know? He has an intern to do his social media. He's surrounded by people who love him and sustain him as a prophet. He's never interacting with people who don't think he's a prophet. I guess there's like the Pope and stuff, but then that's
they're not like having, they're not going at each other theologically.
That's like its own sense of self-importance. Like, you got to meet the Pope, which is crazy because it's like some con man invented a religion in 1830 and now you get to meet the Pope, which is like the centuries old tradition. But anyway, I mean, the Pope's just
a 2,000-year-old cult.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are both the same thing, but still. You know, the Pope's like way more famous. It's like a huge step up for your guy. That was so bad. What was the argument? Just take it easy. Like, his entire argument was just, I think he's trying our best and we don't know anything and therefore we should all just be fine. Like, that is the core argument.
Give abusers a break. That's what that should have been titled.
That was so bad. Oh.
It's not, it isn't anti-Mormonism, it isn't bullying, it's just basic human decency.
It really is.
To ask for an apology.
Strap on a pair.
When such an atrociously damaging thing has been perpetuated on a very vulnerable group of people. And if your first concern, Greg, is that you should worry about the people who perpetuated this and who are least affected by any of it, you need to reevaluate your Christian
said that
values.
You weren't comfortable with.
Where's your post saying that the policy was bad? The only kind of thing I can say about that article is that it was short.
Yeah, thank God. I mean, that's because he had nothing else to say, because he had such a terribly weak argument. He didn't have anything else to expound on. His whole argument was just like, I want to believe that they're trying their best, so therefore they're trying their best. Please align with me.
Well,
I can't bear it if you get mad at my dad, I mean prophet.
Nobody can get me hot and heavy like Greg Trimble.
Seriously, it was even worse than I was expecting, and I had no expectations.
Greg does not really seem to show a lot of ability to learn, does he?
He seems incredibly lacking in intelligence and basic critical thinking skills, and incredibly lacking in compassion for anyone but himself and his own belief system, which like includes the people in power in his own belief system.
We've been talking a lot about power, and it reminded me of this talk I was listening to recently where he talked about the difference between dominance hierarchies and growth hierarchies. Because a lot of people in our generation are just like, ooh, anti-institution, anti-organization of any kind, which I kind of get.
Yeah.
But not an anarchist. I think that there are, you know, growth hierarchies, that it's like a situation that works good for all people. And he said that the way you can distinguish between a dominator hierarchy and a growth hierarchy is that the higher up you go in a growth hierarchy, the more inclusive it will be.
Yep.
Whereas in a dominator hierarchy, it gets more and more exclusive, more and more homogenous.
Yep.
And if you look at the pyramid scheme shape pictures that they put in the Ensign, the conference edition of Ensign, you see this pyramid with white top getting slightly less white as it spreads. Men, of course, straight, cis, of course, all that.
Any religion that doesn't expand your empathy for the most vulnerable people in society and instead just makes you super sympathetic to these people with a shit ton of power, I can't even like give it the time of day. It's so stupid. It's so obvious.
And we maybe fall into the Mormon trap of using Mormonism as a projection of all religion, because the truth is there's a scale of harmfulness.
Definitely.
And Mormonism is on one side of the scale.
Well,
There's
and
like,
there are even better versions of Mormonism, like
Totally.
Church of Christ.
Totally,
Better
which is less
version.
harmful. And you get, but there are, so when he's like, you know, the church is the good ship Zion, it's the best thing that we have, even though it's imperfect, it's like, yeah, but there's ones that are even way less harmful than that. Where it's like you said, trying to facilitate compassion to the most vulnerable. There's, you know, religions, a lot of Eastern religions are not just concerned with like humans, but how we treat animals and how we treat the earth. Their compassion extends beyond the people who are just like them.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot better out there, guys.
If you only have compassion for people that are just like you, you're doing a really shit job. Like,
you
why
don't
are you
have compassion.
even religious? Like, you're obviously just doing it to feel better than other people, and because you're a child who's terrified to confront their own death and like the impermanence of everything.
And which, you know,
we get it. It's hard.
Okay. It is hard.
But it's very hard to have sympathy for people like Greg when they're perpetuating these ideas that harm the most vulnerable people.
Well, it's kind of like we could all be much better about approaching death if we were all on the same page and stop being so avoidant about it and writing these crazy narratives. And
let's try and get closer to that secure attachment style. Russell M. Nelson, who's like preaching an anxious attachment style to the church.
He's I couldn't believe him. He was talking about Adam and Eve, and I'm like, you're a man who's like at least somewhat versed in science. Like, how could you bring Adam and Eve up still?
Deseret Book has this they're advertising Russell M. Nelson's book right now, of course. And there's, I don't know what it's called, like lessons from this old guy. And then there's like a picture of a heart surgeon. That's like the main image on the cover, on the front of Deseret Book. And I'm like, you don't get to use medicine and science. That seems a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Russell Nelson healed my heart.
Well, Greg, you did a really bad job.
Yeah, we know that as a straight white male, it's so hard to be held
for you.
accountable for anything. Wow, that was a bummer.
Stone cold bummer. I
Yeah.
can't believe we just raw dogged that as well.
I won't lie, I'm not totally sober. I couldn't do it.
Damn it, Tanner! If you want to support us, please do so on Patreon. We'll leave the link in the description box. We could really use all the help we can get so we can make as many of these videos for you as possible. Take down as many Greg Trimble'S as we can. I mean, that just really took down Zelph, to be honest.
Can I just say this about our Patreon, just so everyone knows, because we've got some comments of people like, how could you criticize the church for seeking donations while you guys are seeking donations? It's not seeking donations that's the problem. It's the fact that the church claims to be one thing and do one thing with its money and then does a completely different thing and keeps all its finances transparent, even though that's against church doctrine and policy.
We're not hiding the fact that we want money from you on Patreon so we can pay our rent.
And even if we weren't, we're in 100% in this for the money. Well, I'm saying it right here. We want money. That's why we're doing this.
Money!
Money, money, money,
Money, money. We'll do whatever it takes.
We're sellouts. That's what this is all about. And you heard it here first. We're never trying to deny that. God.
But also, we chose this as our cause because we really believe in it.
Yeah.
And we want to burn down the Mormon church.
Yeah, so.